This is Capernaum, the town of Jesus. And when we say the town of Jesus, this is not where Jesus was born. This is not where Jesus grew up. But this is when we start hearing about Jesus, because up until he came here, we don't have much information about him. Okay? The boyhood of Jesus in Nazareth, we almost know nothing about. He came to the temple with his parents once, reading from the scroll of Isaiah once, but you don't really know much about him. And then Jesus came here and ministered in Galilee for 3 years. So most of the things that are in the Gospels are from the time that Jesus spent here in Galilee. And when he was here in Galilee, this was his base, Capernaum. This is where he stayed with his close friend Peter, and from here he went on different missions to different places, always returning back to Capernaum. There's something very important about where we are. We are now at the synagogue of Capernaum, which is the largest synagogue ever discovered in Galilee. The synagogue made of the white stones here is from the 3rd century AD. However, it is all built on top of the 1st century synagogue. Jesus was about 30 years old when he came to Capernaum. And this gigantic synagogue tells us that people from all over Galilee came to listen to the words of Jesus. Rabbinically speaking, he is a boy. 30 years old for a rabbi is a boy. That's when you only begin your ministry. And all of a sudden, everybody knows about Jesus. And that explains to you why the Sadducees and many of the priests did not like that. They were frustrated. Here we are studying the text for 50, 60 years, and we have some followers, but this boy just came from Nazareth and everyone goes after him. So, in addition to Jesus being God, I think that you need to understand also Jesus the person, Jesus the rabbi, because there's no question about Jesus being the greatest rabbi. We don't know of any rabbis that at the age of 30 became such big rabbis that everyone went after them and followed them. And that is something critical to understand about Jesus. Amphitheater of Caesarea. Now you can see that the stadium here is a full circle, not the theater that we saw a few minutes ago. Originally, this was a hippodrome. Hippodrome was for horse races. And now I want your attention because this will explain to you something about the Roman mindset and the clashes between the Romans and the Jews. People, when this functioned as a hippodrome, the royal seats of the Roman dignitaries were over there in the corner. You would think that it'll be somewhere in the middle, but no. Why in the corner? Because this is where the chariots will have to turn. And because of that, this is the vulnerable part of the stadium, and this is where most of the accidents will occur. And that's where people will die and wheels will fly in the air, and that is what the Romans wanted to see, the violence, the blood, and all that. Years later, the hippodrome was converted to an amphitheater, and now it's an arena for execution, and the executive seats are now being moved from there to there, because now they have a better view of what was happening in the arena. And what was happening is Jews and Christians being thrown to the arena, like I said, to be eaten by wild beasts. That was the idea of the horrible games of the Romans of here. So if you ever try to understand why the resentment of the Jews, why all these clashes between the Jews and the Romans, you can now maybe understand, because if this is what they did for entertainment, you can understand that this was not very popular amongst the Jewish people who lived here in Judea. The Great Revolt ended in 73 with the fall of Masada. 60 years later came another big revolt known as Bar Kokhba. Simon Bar Kokhba was the general of the armies of the Jewish people, and the spiritual leader, the rabbi, the chief rabbi, was Rabbi Akiva. And they went to war together. After the war ended, the Romans decided to get rid of Judaism altogether. And because they knew that they will not be able to kill every single Jew, they said, let's kill all the rabbis, and this will do the job. So they went after the rabbis, and they also captured Rabbi Akiva, whom I told you about. They brought him here to the amphitheater of Caesarea, and they tortured him to death. He was bleeding to death for hours and hours after they peeled off his skin and everything. And as he was bleeding to death here, he kept reciting, Shema Israel Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And his disciples came to him and said, Rabbi, why do you keep praising God now when you're suffering so much and you're probably going to die in a few minutes? And Rabbi Akiva's answer to them was, these are the moments that they want to show God how much I love him. And then he died. And from this, there's lots of faith lessons that we don't have time to talk about now. But when you speak about the relationship between God and his chosen people, Rabbi Akiva's answer is the perfect understanding to what that means. He has given, he has taken, blessed be his name. I'm going to love God not only when everything is beautiful in my life, but also when I'm suffering so much and I'm bleeding to death here. This is when I want to show God how much I love him. And then he died. But that is the Jewish aspect of what happened here in Caesarea. You need to remember from here, from Mount Carmel, it doesn't matter how many people are on the other side and how many armies are on the other side, one plus God is majority.
Amen.
Amen. That's exactly the story of Elijah. He knew that. It doesn't matter who's there. I have God on my side. How can I possibly lose? How can I even be afraid? And same thing was with David when he was a boy and he went to the Elah Valley to confront the giant Goliath that everyone else failed to do. King Saul didn't want to do that. No one from the armies of Israel wanted to do that. But David came with a belief, not because of his power or his size or the better weapons that he had. He didn't have any of that. But he knew, if God is with me, it doesn't matter if it's a giant or if it's an entire army, it just makes no difference. And on the broader scale, you can say that this is also the story of the Jewish people. Because throughout history, we were going to be annihilated by the Assyrians and the Egyptians and the Canaanites and the Jebusites and the Amorites and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans, mighty empires. Many of them on the same scale of America today, if not bigger. All of them are long gone. And the nation of Israel is still alive. God was on our side and he still is on our side. And that is why you can understand what Elijah did here. By the way, the name Elijah in Hebrew is Eliyahu. And Elijah, Eliyahu in Hebrew means God. God is my God. God is Yahweh. Yahweh is God. Yahweh, God is my God. There's about 6 or 7 different variations of the name of God into one name. And in our culture here, when you are raised and you of course receive a name, you try to stand for the name that you were given. You want to justify your name that you were given. So think of the burden on Elijah's shoulders when that's the name that he was given, Eliyahu. And of course he justified his name. And so is Obadiah. Obadiah means God's servant. So he was not as powerful as Elijah, but he too was a righteous man who hid the prophets from Ahab and Jezebel. We don't know exactly where that was, where the whole event took place, but we assume it's got to be very close to where we are now, because this is the summit of Mount Carmel. And we know that back in the ancient times, in order to make a point, you would go to the very highest place. So everybody will be able to see you and you will demonstrate your show over there. So it can't possibly be too far from where we are right now. Achan has a very important role also in the story of King Saul. King Saul finally acted with courage. He was brave, and it seems as if he said, everything that I failed to do all my life, I get it straight now, and I'm going to go to battle tomorrow, knowing what the consequences will be. And he went to battle as a hero, and he was badly injured and asked his servant to kill him, and his servant refused. So he fell on his sword and died. His sons died. Israel was defeated. And then the Philistines took their bodies, and it says in the Bible, hung them on the walls of the city of Beit. There's something very interesting that starts now. What we know next is that the people of Jabesh Gilead came and took the bodies of Saul and his sons and took them back to Jabesh, which is the mountains of Gilead, and honored them and gave them a proper burial over there. And we're asking ourselves, why? Why do the people of Jabesh have to come all the way to here? Aren't there enough Jewish people here in the area to honor their king? And this is very interesting. Give me 2 minutes and you'll see how amazing the Bible is. If we go way, way back, and I already talked about the story of the Levite man that was walking with his concubine between Jerusalem and Bethlehem. And then they retired to this man's house towards the evening and asked for a shelter. Remember? And the people of Benjamin came and said to the man, give us the lady and the man so we can kill them. And he refused and said, I'll give you my virgin daughter, but just don't hurt my guests. And eventually he had to send the woman out, and they abused her all night and killed her. And because of that horrific thing, all the tribes of Israel declared war on Benjamin. And there was a point where the Benjamites almost extinct altogether, and finally God gave permission to the other tribes to stop the war with Benjamin. You're asking yourselves now, why is he telling us all that? Well, what we're doing here is a short rabbinic studies, so you'll understand how rabbis teach their disciples in Jewish schools. So we start with that, and then we continue, and we know from the story that in order to have the tribe of Benjamin thrive again, they needed to marry women, but there were almost no men left, and all those who participated in the battle with Benjamin swore not to marry them. And only then they remembered that the only people that did not participate in that battle were the people of Jabesh Gilead. So they brought several hundred virgins from Jabesh Gilead to marry the men of Benjamin. At this point, you're not quite sure why am I still telling you this, but now all the dots connect. Because King Saul was from the tribe of Benjamin. And when the people of Jabesh Gilead are being attacked by enemies, who did they cry out for to come and help them? King Saul. Not only because he is the king of Israel, but because he is their brother. He is a Benjamite, and they married the people of Benjamin. And King Saul does not hesitate, and he goes there and he helps his brothers. And that is why when King Saul dies in battle and is being hung on the walls of Beit, his brothers on the other side of the Jordan River remember that, and they come all the way to here to give honor to their brother Saul. See how all the dots connect into an amazing story. So once again, there's nothing in the Bible that is there for no reason. All we have to do is to explore, and sometimes we have to go back to events that took place 300 years earlier, but that's where the seeds were planted, so we will understand the story that happened centuries later on. So that is briefly the story of King Saul here at Beit Shean. But really what I want us to remember is that, like I said about King Ahab, that eventually died as a hero in his chariot, asking his people to lift him up even though he was heavily bleeding, and finally did the right thing. That's what King Saul did. The last day of his life, he finally acted as a king, died as a king, and as a hero. And so this is one thing that we have to give him credit for and to remember when we speak about King Saul.